Pope Francis's delegate has delivered an ultimatum to India's rebel Syro-Malabar Catholic priests after he was pelted with rotten eggs, stones, and bottles. Joining us with the latest from the Eternal City Church Militant Rome correspondent, Dr. Jules Gomez. Jules, this sounds like a full-scale revolt. Can you tell us what happened?
Rodney, today is not only the feast of the Assumption of Our Lady, but it is also India's Independence Day. And Syro-Malabar Catholics seem to be really fighting to throw off the yoke of the colonial Vatican, as they put it. Yesterday, when Archbishop Cyril Vasil, Pope Francis's delegate, sent to resolve the 50-year-old civil liturgical war in the Syro-Malabar Church, as he was entering the St. Mary's Basilica in Ernakulam, he was pelted with stones and rotten eggs and bottles. He had to have a posse of 100 police surround him and protect him. Now, he brought the Eucharist with him, and people are saying, his opponents are saying, this was a weaponization of the Holy Eucharist. Police resorted to what Indians call a lathi charge. That is, when police trying to disperse a mob with batons. And the police, they say the police were quite brutal with some of the protesters. But the Archbishop was not able to enter the cathedral. He was taken to the Archbishop of Ernakulam's house and then taken into the cathedral through a side entrance. He had to be taken out of the cathedral again through a side entrance. And that is the report I'm getting from the ground in Kerala, India, Rodney.
Wow, that is crazy. Could you give me and our viewers a brief background to this civil war? You said it's been around for a few decades already. What's going on with that?
Well, it's been around since Vatican II, especially because the Syro-Malabar Church is one of the most ancient churches in the world. St. Thomas the Apostle brought the gospel to India in AD 52. And the Syro-Malabar Christians followed the ancient East Syriac rite when celebrating the Holy Mass, or the Holy Kurbana, as they call it, and they would always face the altar. However, with Vatican II, there were modernist priests who decided it was a good idea to Romanize and Latinize the liturgy, and so they began facing the people. Now, there has been a massive split in the Syro-Malabar Church. There are 35 dioceses spread all across the world, and the most dioceses have agreed to a compromise formula hammered out in a synod of bishops and approved by Pope Francis, where the priest faces the people in the first part of the Mass, the Liturgy of the Word, and then turns to face the altar for the second part, the celebration of the Holy Eucharist. Now, the Diocese of Ernakulam and Gamali has held out and are refusing to accept the compromise formula. About 400 priests have been revolting, and the St. Mary's Basilica has been shut for 300 days since Christmas last year, when there was sacrilege in the cathedral. The altar was stormed, attacked, hosts of wine all over the place, etc., etc. Wow. So this is a revolt that has been, that has reached its peak yesterday.
So the priests who are revolting, are they the ones who want to continue facing east for the whole Mass?
They are, yes. They are the ones who want to, they're the modernists, let's put it this way, who want to face the people throughout the Mass and kind of go along with Vatican II, ironically, even though it's an Eastern church. And the rest of the diocese, the rest of the priests have accepted the compromise formula of 50-50, facing the people half the time and then turning to face the altar.
So historically, the popes have been very hands-off. When it comes to the Eastern rites, they allow the bishops of the various rites to handle any liturgical changes that happen. Why is Pope Francis involving himself in this?
That's a very good question, Rodney, and it's even more pertinent because this is not just another Eastern Rite church. This is an Eastern Rite church that suffered the persecution of Latin missionaries in the 16th century when the Portuguese arrived. They were shocked to discover Christians who had even more ancient liturgical rites than the traditional Latin Mass, or the Tridentine Mass as it was then. And they persecuted these ancient Christians. They forced them to come under the authority of Rome. Some did not. And they burned their ancient liturgical books, etc. I mean, ironically, the very Latin Mass that is now being banned by the Pope, these Catholics attacked these ancient Christians and persecuted them. Now, the historic memory of all this is fresh, even though it's been 500 years. And when the Christians there see the Vatican responding in such a manner, it brings back bitter memories to mind. Now, Pope Francis probably doesn't know this history, and his advisors have not informed him that this is a particularly inflammatory situation. Moreover, my feeling from what I hear from sources on the ground is that the bishops, and particularly the Archbishop and the Cardinal Alan Cherry, have personally pleaded with the Pope to intervene because they have not been able to solve the problem. So they're passing the buck on to Pope Francis. And they have lost credibility because Cardinal Alan Cherry, for example, has been embroiled in several land scams. So the bishops of Kerala have lost credibility with their own people. They've also aligned themselves very closely with the Hindu nationalist right, acquiescing and trying to appease them. And so people are not willing to trust the bishops anymore, just as they don't trust the bishops in the West.
So what did the papal legate, Archbishop Cyril Vassal, so he went into the cathedral to speak. What did he end up telling the priests and the laity?
Well, that this is phase 2, because today on the Feast of the Assumption, he did enter the Basilica for Mass, and it was during, he gave a very strong homily to, I think there were about 200 priests there, and he basically laid down the line, this is the final ultimatum, do or die. If you don't obey, that's the end for you. He warned the priests not to follow the sacrilegious acts of the rebels. And we can listen to what he has to say, snippets of what he has to say in this sermon.
Do you prefer to listen to your Pope, or do you prefer to listen in the name of the false solidarity, or because you have been intimidated, to some priests who are leading you towards a de facto separation from the Catholic Church? Do you allow yourselves to be intimidated by small groups of violent protesters who fulfill the plans of some dark forces and come to disturb or even prevent the celebration of Kurbana according to the synodal decision? Are you with the Pope or against him?
Very, very strong words, as you can see. I mean, if you listen to the whole sermon, there are even stronger bits there. But that was, very direct and no alternatives given, which has upset the people even more.
Okay. Wow. So did his words actually succeed in calming down any of the protesters? Was this made worse? I have a feeling it might have made things worse, but tell us how that went.
Rodney, you're right, unfortunately. Even before the sermon, the rebel priest was saying that, Pope Francis talks about dialogue all the time. He talks about listening, but he sent his delegate, and his delegate is not willing to dialogue with us. And this has made things far, far worse. because now many of the Syro-Malabar Christians who are protesting have said that they want Archbishop Cyril, who is a foreigner in India, to be deported by the government. Let me read to you what a statement from the Archdiocesan Movement for Transparency says. The forced entry of Vasil, who claimed to be pontifical delegate, has further aggravated the situation in the Archdiocese. We are now planning to write to the federal ministries of Home and Foreign Affairs demanding immediate deportation of Archbishop Vasil, who is creating a law and order problem in the country. Archbishop Vasil is a foreigner and has no right to interfere in the domestic situation and creating a law and order problem. So basically, what he's saying is that we don't want the Vatican to tell us what to do. And remember, this is not a 50-year-old problem. It's a 500-year-old problem. And Archbishop Vasil ended his sermon, by the way, on his knees. And he said, I beg of you and ask forgiveness for anything on the part of anyone who may have given any reason for any real or supposed justification for this rebellion. Not exactly clear why he should be asking forgiveness for those who have committed this rebellion, but that is what he said.
So, Jules, sources on the ground actually gave you an in-depth analysis of the problem. Can you give us a brief version of it?
Well, these are priests who are talking to me from the diocese, and they're saying things like, this is the same Pope, the one who is forcing the Western Church to face the people. How come this small Eastern Rite Church has to face the altar now? Is this not, or has to adopt a compromise formula? Is this not a contradiction or a hypocrisy? So basically, they're pointing out to what the Pope has done in terms of the Novus Ordo and the traditional Latin Mass. Or, my sources tell me, is this a Western style of divide and rule? Bishop Vasil is also the classmate of Bishop Andrew in the Archdiocese of Ernakulam and Gamali. And this has further infuriated the people because they think he's taking sides. Moreover, this is the administrator, Bishop Andrew, who also studied in Rome. And the sources say synods make big mistakes, and majority always could, because it is always the majority who makes these decisions. My sources are saying, in this case, it is 34 dioceses versus one diocese. So the Roman Catholic Church should never adopt the synodal style of Protestant churches.
Yeah, the synodal way is kind of how the East has done it for millennia, and it has its own problems, obviously. Is there a solution to this problem, and why is Pope Francis just letting things remain status quo?
There is a solution, and again, priests on the ground tell me, just live and let live. If this one diocese wants to face the people for the whole Mass. I mean, the whole world, the Latin Church, is doing it in the Novus Ordo. So what's your problem if 400 priests from this one small diocese continue to face the people? That is what the priests on the ground are saying. So just let us live and let us follow our practice. Don't suffocate us. Don't come down on us with a sledgehammer and force us to do things. And the solution, for example, one of them says, who served in Italy, in Milan, he says, there are churches in Milan, just a few hours away from Rome, that adopt a different rite. I think he's referring to the Ambrosian rite. So if Rome and Milan both Latin rite dioceses, technically speaking, can let there be liturgical diversity, why can't we have it in the Syro-Malabar Church in Kerala?
Yeah, it's an interesting thought. But obviously they came up with this facing the people after kind of this Vatican II era normalized it for them. So for them, that would be an innovation for them, right?
It would indeed.
Yeah.
And this is again the puzzle here. On the one hand, they're so touchy about their ancient rites, and particularly the glories of the East Syriac rite. So why in the first place did they go along with the Latinization and the Romanization? Again, ironically, since they were persecuted for centuries by the Latin Church. Yeah. It seems like this is almost certainly going to end up in a schism, Rodney, as has happened, over and over again in the past.
Wow. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Jules, for telling us about this. Let's everybody pray for everyone involved. Okay.